There comes a moment in every Scorpio's life when the whispers they've ignored for years begin to roar. It doesn't start with applause. It starts with a quiet ache, an uneasiness in the soul, a deep, unexplainable knowing that you're not living the life you were meant to live. And for Scorpio, that ache isn't ordinary. It's ancestral, it's cosmic, it's sacred. You see, Scorpios aren't here to blend in. They're not here to follow the rules of a broken world. They're here to transform it, to break the illusion, to burn the lie, to step into the fire not to be consumed, but to rise. But most Scorpios don't answer that call right away. They delay, they protect, they build walls. Why? Because answering the call requires death, the death of the mask, the persona, the comfort zone. And Scorpio knows death better than anyone. But what happens when they finally say yes? When a Scorpio, the sign of rebirth, resurrection, and raw soul power, finally stops running from their divine assignment, the world doesn't just change, it trembles. This is not just a personality shift. This is a cosmic activation, a moment when karma catches up, when destiny rushes in, when old timelines collapse and a new reality is born through their eyes. So if you're a Scorpio watching this right now, and something inside you has been stirring, shaking, whispering, it's time, then stay with me. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a reflection of your own becoming. The world has been waiting for you to remember who you are, and once you do, there's no going back. Part 1, the hidden calling. Scorpio always felt, before Scorpio ever learned to speak, they were already listening, not to the noise of the world, but to something deeper, something ancient, a current running beneath the surface of life. While other children chased noise and light, Scorpio lingered in silence. They saw things others didn't. They felt things others couldn't name. Pain in their mother's voice even when she smiled. Fear in a teacher's eyes even when she laughed. They knew who was lying, even when no one else suspected it. Most people called it being too sensitive. But for Scorpio, it wasn't just emotion, it was information. It was a message, a signal from the universe that they were not just here to exist, they were here to awaken. But no one told them that. No one looked them in the eyes and said, "You are different. You see what others cannot. Protect that sight." Instead, they were told to toughen up, to stop overreacting, to smile more, to just be normal. So Scorpio learned to hide it, to suppress the knowing, to blend into a world that didn't know what to do with their depth. But the calling didn't go away. It just went silent, like a distant drumbeat buried beneath years of pretending. Let me tell you a story. There was once a Scorpio woman named Eliana. She worked in finance, wore the right clothes, said the right things, but at night, she couldn't sleep. She'd dream of water, of drowning, of being pulled by unseen forces. Every dream ended the same way, a voice whispering, "You know this isn't why you came here." And one morning she broke, not in a dramatic way, but in the kind of way only Scorpios understand: quiet, controlled, dead calm. She left her job that week, moved to Arizona, became a therapist, and now she helps women heal from trauma so deep even they can't name it. No one could understand why she left a six-figure job. But Scorpio doesn't need approval when the calling becomes clear. When it speaks, they listen. The truth is, every Scorpio has a signature wound, and that wound often is the map to their mission. The very pain they tried to bury is the exact pain they're meant to transform for others. But before they can do that, they must stop hiding. They must stop pretending they are ordinary, because they never were. Life lesson from part 1. The calling doesn't scream, it whispers. And the longer you ignore it, the louder the ache becomes. For Scorpio, the ache isn't weakness, it's the soul remembering who you truly are, and it will not let you forget. Part 2. The fear that held them back. If Scorpio was born with a calling, then they were also born with something awesome, just as powerful fear, not the fear of danger. Scorpio doesn't flinch at darkness. They've walked through shadows their whole life. No, the fear that holds Scorpio back is far more subtle. It's the fear of being truly seen, of being exposed in all their emotional intensity, of letting the world witness the rawness that lives inside them. Because what if they're too much? What if the world sees the truth and walks away? Many Scorpios, especially in childhood, learn this the hard way. They reveal a dream. They share a secret. They cry too hard, love too deeply, feel too much. And they're met with silence, mockery, rejection. So they adapt. They build walls higher than any fortress. They wear masks so convincing that even they forget what's underneath. And over time, the calling fades. Not because it's gone, but because they're too scared to answer it. Because answering means being vulnerable. And for Scorpio, that's more terrifying than death. Let me share a story. There was a Scorpio man named Marcus. Brilliant mind, artist's soul. But he was raised in a house where emotions were weakness, where sensitivity was punished, where dreams were laughed at. By age 15, he stopped painting. By 25, he was in corporate marketing. By 30, he was drinking alone in silence every night. Until one day, he opened his old sketchbook and saw a drawing he had done at 13. It was of a phoenix burning but smiling. He cried for 2 hours because he realized the boy inside him had known all along. And the man he had become was just a ghost. Fear kept him from his calling. And that's what fear does to Scorpio. Not destroy them outright, but convince them to destroy themselves slowly by silence. Fear says, you'll lose love if you show your real self. You'll be laughed at. You'll be too much. But here's the secret. Your calling is always louder than your fear, and it will wait for you, but it will not beg. Eventually, Scorpio must choose live half a life, or risk everything to live the true one. And when they finally choose truth over comfort, everything begins to shift. Life lesson from part 2. The fear you feel is not a sign to stop. It's a sign you're getting close to the truth. For Scorpio, the fear of being exposed is really just the fear of being seen as powerful as you truly are. And the moment you face it, the calling begins to move through you. Part 3, the shadow path they took instead. When Scorpio runs from their calling, they don't run into stillness. They run straight into the shadow. And for a time, that shadow feels powerful. It gives them armor, it gives them focus, it gives them control. But control is not the same as purpose. You see, when Scorpio suppresses their true light, they don't become harmless. They become dangerous but misdirected. They begin to channel their intensity not into healing, but into manipulation, not into transformation, but into domination. They study people not to understand, but to protect, to guard, to punish, to control every variable so they never get hurt again. They may become obsessively private or chronically distrustful. They isolate themselves in silence that feels safe, but is actually a prison. And sometimes they chase power for the sake of never feeling weak again. Let me tell you a story. Her name was Ayla, a Scorpio born to a mother who abandoned her and a father who used silence as a weapon. By the time she was 20, she had built a life out of pure willpower. Top of her class, running her own business, untouchable, unreadable, unstoppable. But inside, she couldn't trust love. She couldn't cry, not even alone. And she couldn't look at herself in the mirror without feeling like a lie. She had everything, except peace. Scorpio is often praised for being strong, but sometimes strength becomes the mask they hide behind. When the world says, wow, you're so powerful, they nod politely, but inside they're screaming, I'm not powerful, I'm in pain. And instead of answering the divine call, they build empires made of trauma. But here's the thing about the shadow path. It never leads nowhere. Even in the darkness, Scorpio is learning, preparing, being refined by fire. The betrayal they faced taught them discernment. The loneliness they chose taught them focus. The mask they wore taught them discipline, but none of it was the destination. Because Scorpio wasn't born to control the world, they were born to transform it. And that can only happen when they stop playing the role and start living the truth. Life lesson from part 3. You can spend years building a fortress to protect yourself from pain, but eventually that same fortress becomes your cage. For Scorpio, the shadow path may feel like survival, but it's only when they walk through it and emerge from it that they remember their light is not something to be feared. It's something to be used. Part 4. The moment life collapsed. Every Scorpio has one. A moment. A collapse. Not a gentle nudge. Not a quiet whisper. But a full-scale breakdown. Of the job. The relationship. The belief system. The identity. Everything they thought they needed, everything they used to define themselves begins to fall apart, and the world mistakes it for failure. But for Scorpio, it is the sacred undoing, the necessary death, the first step toward becoming who they truly are. Scorpio doesn't transform through comfort. They awaken through destruction. Why? Because they are ruled by Pluto, the planet of death, rebirth, and regeneration. Their soul chose this path, not to suffer, but to strip away the illusion. And sometimes the universe has to take everything just to show Scorpio that they were never meant to cling to anything. Let me share a real story. Jonathan was a Scorpio who had it all. High-paying job in tech, penthouse apartment in Seattle, a beautiful fiancée. But beneath it all, he was numb, disconnected, haunted by dreams of drowning. He told himself it was just stress, until one day his company folded, his engagement ended, and his father passed away, all in the same month. He sat in the middle of his now empty apartment and laughed, not because it was funny, but because everything was gone, and he was still breathing. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt free. Scorpio's collapse isn't the end, it's the beginning of sight. The masks melt, the noise disappears, and they're left alone naked, real, and finally ready to listen. What rises after that moment is no longer shaped by trauma, it's shaped by truth. Because in the ruins, Scorpio remembers, you are not what you lost, you are what you still carry inside you. This moment is brutal, but it's holy, because it clears the path, it removes the false, it ends the pretending. And now for the first time, the calling has room to speak. Life lesson from part 4. Collapse is not punishment, it is sacred disruption. For Scorpio, life must first remove what's false before it can reveal what's divine. And sometimes the only way forward is for everything to fall apart so you can rise again in truth. Part 5. The signs the universe keeps sending after the collapse. Scorpio doesn't return to life as usual. Because by then the veil has been lifted, something ancient stirs within, and suddenly everything begins to speak. But it doesn't speak in language, it speaks in signs. 11:11, on the clock every day, repeated dreams, songs that play at the exact moment they need to hear them, people showing up in uncanny ways, animals crossing their path, owls, scorpions, black cats again and again. Scorpio starts to sense that something is guiding them, that the universe isn't silent, it's just coded. And only now are they starting to decode it. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio named Daria. After her divorce, she moved to a town she'd never heard of purely by impulse. She kept seeing the number 444 on receipts, on license plates, even in her dreams. She Googled it, 444, angelic protection. The universe is with you. You are being guided. That same week, she met a woman in a bookstore who said, "You have healer's hands. Have you ever practiced energy work?" Daria had never said a word, but something inside her cracked open. She began studying Reiki, and 2 years later, she opened her own healing center. Her life made sense. Finally, for Scorpio, the universe whispers through mystery. Not because it wants to confuse them, but because Scorpio is meant to be initiated. Their path is not linear, it's spiral, symbolic, sacred. But make no mistake, the signs are real, and the longer they ignore them, the more chaotic life becomes. What starts as gentle nudges becomes discomfort, then loss, then full-blown crisis. Not as punishment, but as redirection. Because the universe won't let Scorpio forget who they are. It won't let them sleepwalk through a life that isn't theirs. Not when they were born to be a guide, a seer, a healer, a force of evolution. So the signs keep coming until they're too obvious to ignore. Until Scorpio stops asking, "Is this real?" and starts saying, "What are you trying to show me?" Life lesson from part 5. Signs don't come to entertain you. They come to awaken you. For Scorpio, the language of the universe is not outside them, it lives inside their intuition. And once they start listening, the path appears. Part 6. When they step into the fire. There's a moment when Scorpio stops running, stops pretending, stops asking the world for permission to be who they are. And in that moment, they step into the fire. Not the fire of punishment, but the fire of transformation. This is not metaphor for Scorpio, this is initiation. When other signs seek safety, Scorpio seeks depth. When others seek comfort, Scorpio seeks truth. Even if it burns, especially if it burns. Because they've spent too long living half alive, hiding behind strength masks and silence. But when they step into the fire, they're not trying to survive it. They're trying to be reborn through it. Let me tell you about Elijah. He was a Scorpio who lost everything in a fire, literally. An electrical spark burned down his home and studio. Years of art. Destroyed. He stood barefoot in the ashes, and something inside him clicked. "I've been burning from the inside for years," he said. "Now the outside just caught up." Instead of rebuilding his old life, he let it die. He bought a van, traveled, painted murals on city walls. No galleries, no exhibitions, no filters. People called it a meltdown, he called it liberation. Because for Scorpio, the fire is sacred. It doesn't destroy them. It refines them. It strips away the false layers until only the essence remains. And that essence is unshakable. This moment is terrifying. Because Scorpio must face their deepest wound without armor, without deflection, without control. But it's also the first moment they truly meet themselves. Not the survivor, not the achiever, not the seducer, but the soul that has been waiting beneath it all. And in that moment, they finally understand what the pain was preparing them for. Not punishment, not weakness, but purpose. Life lesson from part 6. You can't bypass the fire. You must walk through it barefoot, broken, and brave. For Scorpio, fire is not the enemy. It's the sacred doorway to becoming who they were always meant to be. Because on the other side of the flame is the real you. Part 7. The gift they were always meant to give. Every Scorpio carries a gift. Not a talent, not a skill. A gift. Something so rare, so deeply encoded in their soul that no one else can replicate it. It doesn't come from books. It doesn't come from training. It comes from survival, from what they've lost, from what they've endured, from every scar they've turned into gold. And when Scorpio finally walks through the fire, they don't come out empty-handed. They come out carrying that gift, ready to offer it to the world. But here's the secret: Scorpio's gift is never about them. It's not about fame. It's not about being seen. It's not even about being understood. It's about healing the collective wound through their presence, their wisdom, their art, their silence, their depth. They become the lighthouse, the mirror, the alchemist. Let me tell you a story. Her name was Maren. A Scorpio who had been emotionally abused for years by family, by partners, by her own mind. One day, she started writing. Not for the world, just for herself. She wrote letters she would never send, stories she'd never dare say out loud. She turned her pain into poetry. Years later, someone found her journals, encouraged her to publish. She resisted. She didn't want exposure, she wanted peace. But when she finally said yes, her words helped thousands of women feel seen for the first time. She never called herself a healer, but she was. Because her gift wasn't in her pain. Her gift was in what she did with it. That's the key. Scorpio's gift is not the trauma, it's the transmutation of trauma. The alchemy, the phoenix moment. Not everyone can look into darkness without flinching, but Scorpio can. And not only do they survive it, they return with the medicine. That medicine might be spoken, it might be written, it might be silent. But when Scorpio begins to give it not for validation, not for revenge, but from truth, they become unstoppable. Not loud, not boastful, but powerful in the quietest way possible. Because nothing moves people like someone who's been there and made it back. Life lesson from part 7. Your greatest gift isn't what you know, it's what you've overcome. For Scorpio, the real power is not in what they've built, but in what they've risen from. And when they begin to give from that sacred place, the world doesn't just notice, it heals. Part 8. The new enemies that test their light. Just when Scorpio thinks they've found their path, the tests return. But this time they don't come as chaos. They come dressed as admiration, as partnerships, as opportunities, as people who say all the right things but carry all the wrong energy. Because the deeper Scorpio steps into their purpose, the more visible their light becomes. And light always attracts both seekers and shadows. You see, the old enemies were obvious toxic lovers, cold parents, empty jobs. But the new ones, they wear spiritual language. They say, I support you. They clap when you win, until your light makes them feel small. And if Scorpio isn't careful, they may confuse these tests as allies, because they no longer look like threats. They look like mirrors. But Scorpio knows a mirror that doesn't reflect your soul is just another mask. Let me share a story. Tyrell was a Scorpio who began mentoring at-risk youth. He poured his past into their healing. His program was raw, real, and growing fast. Then came the investor. Smooth words, big promises. I want to help you grow this. Let's go global. It all sounded right, but something felt off. The man kept asking for control, to change the message, to tone it down, to make it more digestible. Tyrell walked away. Months later, the investor tried to launch a copycat program and failed, because what Tyrell had was never just a business. It was born from fire, and only those who walked through the fire could carry it. Scorpio must remember, not everyone who smiles is safe, not everyone who claps is kind, and not every opportunity is aligned with your purpose. Sometimes the universe tests your loyalty, not to others, but to yourself. This is the phase of spiritual warfare no one talks about when you're in your power, when you're doing everything right. And the shadows still come to distract you, dilute you, delay you. Not because you're failing, but because you're finally dangerous to darkness. Life lesson from part 8. Just because the storm has passed doesn't mean the war is over. The greater your light, the subtler the test. For Scorpio, discernment isn't optional, it's sacred protection. Because when you rise, you must learn to guard your purpose, as fiercely as you once guarded your pain. Part 9. The quiet power that changes everything. When Scorpio has walked through the pain, faced the fear, passed the tests, and honored the calling, something changes. But not in the way the world expects. There are no fireworks, no headlines, no loud declarations. Instead, there is a quiet, a stillness that doesn't beg to be seen, a presence that speaks louder than words, a vibration that enters the room before they do and lingers long after they've left. Scorpio becomes a force not because they shout, but because they no longer need to. This is when Scorpio steps into their true power, not the power of control, not the power of secrets, not the power of revenge, but the power of clarity, of alignment, of living so deeply in truth that anything false cannot survive in their presence. They don't just speak healing, they are healing. They don't just lead, they embody what others spend their lives searching for. And that embodiment changes everything. Let me tell you a story. There was a Scorpio elder named Ruth. She didn't teach in classrooms. She didn't write books. She didn't post her wisdom online. But people traveled from across the country just to sit with her in silence. Because her presence, rooted, steady, awakened, did something to them. People would walk in anxious. They'd walk out in tears. She never claimed to be a healer. She never gave advice. She just listened. She just was. And that was enough. That's the final evolution of Scorpio's power. Not to control, not to force, not even to prove, but to become the mountain unmoved, to become the ocean deep and endless, to become the sacred stillness in a world that has forgotten how to breathe. At this stage, Scorpio is no longer interested in chasing anything, not love, not status, not validation, because everything they need, they've already met inside themselves. They are no longer on the hunt. They have become the home. Life lesson from part 9. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. For Scorpio, the greatest strength isn't in what they can take, but in what they can carry, without ever needing to explain. And in that quiet power, Scorpio doesn't just change themselves, they shift the world around them. Conclusion: you were always the flame. So now you know, the collapse wasn't punishment, the pain wasn't random, the silence wasn't a void, it was preparation. Because you, Scorpio, were never just here to survive, you were here to awaken. You weren't born to follow, you weren't built to blend, you were called to burn away illusion, to walk into fire, and to rise again and again, not as someone new, but as who you always were. The calling you felt, it was never outside of you. It lived in your first heartbreak. It echoed in the moments you were silenced. It called to you through every betrayal, every goodbye, every collapse. And the reason it felt so heavy is because it was never meant to be carried alone. It was meant to be activated. And now you've heard it. You can't unhear it, and you don't want to, because something inside you has changed. Not because you watched this, but because you remembered something ancient, something sacred. You are the flame, not the flicker, not the match. The flame. You ignite truth. You burn away pretense. You walk into rooms and reality shifts because your energy carries weight now. And not everyone will understand that. Not everyone is meant to, but you understand, and you were meant to. So, Scorpio, where do you go from here? You stop doubting, you stop hiding, you stop apologizing for the depth, the silence, the intensity, because now you know it was never a flaw. It was the portal. And when you walk through that portal, when you choose purpose over pain, when you live not in fear, but in forward, you don't just change, you awaken the world. Final life lesson: you weren't waiting for a sign, you are the sign. You weren't lost, you were just preparing. And now, it's your time. Call to action. The path to Buddha wisdom. If this message stirred something ancient inside you, if you felt seen, felt called, felt remembered, then don't let it fade. Subscribe to the path to Buddha wisdom, because what's ahead for you is not just healing, it's evolution. And you don't have to walk it alone anymore. Scorpio, the world doesn't need a louder version of you. It needs the real you, the flame, the force, the truth, and you're ready now.